Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining. I'm going to give it 30 more seconds as people join us. If you can, I'd love if you could turn your camera on. It's always nice to be talking to people and not feel like I'm talking to myself. And I'd love for this to be interactive. And so yeah, if you're in a place where you can turn your camera on, that would be great. Okay, I'll give it 10 more seconds just to make sure everyone's here. Okay. Wow, we have 38 people. That's great. Thank you all for joining today on a Monday afternoon or afternoon for me. I'm based in Denver, so it is noon here. I know we only have about 30 minutes together, so I'm going to dive right in. But as I mentioned, if you have questions, feel free to add them to the chat and I'll respond as I go along. Or if you want to chime in and ask the question, that's great as well. I want to make sure everyone finds this session incredibly useful. So today we're going to talk about your experience interviews, also known as FIT interviews, behavioral interviews, right? Lots of different names, PEI when it comes to McKinsey. And so this is a part of the case that I personally think is one of the most important. And the reason I think that is because people often forget about it. A lot of people spend time preparing for the actual case, or even, their resumes and networking and other things. And they forget that this is a pretty critical opportunity during your interview where you can show some personality, share some things that the interviewer or the firm may not know. And so excited to be sharing my tips for preparing for the experience part of the interview. So today, I'll give a brief background and introduction to myself, go over the experience interview and the different components of it, share some strategies for success. I'll also introduce a few packages that I offer in case anyone is looking for additional coaching, and then we'll end with a discount that I will share with all of you. So hello again, I'm Manali. As I mentioned, I'm based in Denver, Colorado. And my job really is to be a trusted partner for those applying to consulting companies, either out of business school or before business school. And I really take pride in helping you figure out how you can stand out during this process, given how competitive it can be. So a little bit of background about myself. I attended the University of Notre Dame for undergrad, went into sales and trading post undergrad, and then a fintech company, which IPO'd in 2018. So really, really exciting. And then I went to business school knowing I wanted to do consulting. Before business school at the fintech company, I was on the capital market side, but I had the chance to do a go-to-market type project with someone who was doing an externship from McKinsey. And that's when I realized that that was something I was really excited about. So went to Booth knowing that I wanted to apply, and was in a pool of about 300 people who were also applying for consulting. So very competitive. And I learned a lot, right? Preparing for the interviews and then completing the interviews. I ended up making it to the final rounds for Bain, BCG, and McKinsey, and then accepted an offer to McKinsey's Denver office. I spent about a little over 2 years, almost 2.5 years at McKinsey doing all different types of industries and functions. And I was very heavily involved in recruiting and everything associated with it. So things like resume screening, but also preparing events for those who were accepted and doing an internship, serving as a buddy for new joiners, basically through the whole cycle. Yeah, any questions? Otherwise, I'll keep going. Okay. Oh yeah, and Amanda shared a discount. So you can use this code up until the end of August, and it's basically $50 off of any package. Okay, So I'm going to broadly call this the experience interview. As I said, you might hear different things like fit, behavioral, PEI. And I think, I break it down into really three components. So which consultants tend to do, right? Bucket everything into threes. So there's this introduction piece, there's the actual fit interview, and then the behavioral interview. And the way I like to start with any preparation, right, for interviews, for applications, anything like that, is really understanding, why does this process exist? Why are they asking the questions they're asking? What is the objective? And so I think that really helps if you have a clear understanding of the objective when you're doing your preparation. So for the introduction, right, you might get a question like, tell me about yourself, or walk me through your resume. You might get nothing at all, right? But you should be prepared in case one of these do come up. And the goal here is really to be concise and clear, right? And to be captivating. So if the person walks away not remembering anything else, are they going to remember you, and what are they going to remember about you? And I think the more you practice, what someone wants to walk away when they from your conversation or your interview, the more clear it is. And, even if everything else goes differently and it doesn't go as well as you want, at least you've focused on that one point and they are walking away with that. So I think it's really important to think about, what is it that you want the interviewer to hear when you respond to this, right? Because they're interviewing tons of other candidates. And how do you make sure that it's clear enough that they remember it and walk away with it? The fit interview is different from the behavioral. And I think people kind of, combine these or don't think about them separately. But fit questions are really designed to assess how well you align with the company, right? And this means in terms of culture, values, the teams you're working on, your ambitions, right? And the purpose here is they want to make sure that you're happy and that it's a good fit, and that you can build a relationship there and potentially be there long term, and that your working style is going to match those in the team room, that the pace of things is going to be something you enjoy, all of that, right? And so these questions really aim to get underneath that, to say, who are you, what's your style, what's your personality, as I mentioned. And so I'll share a couple examples of fit questions, but they're different from behavioral. And then behavioral questions are really trying to evaluate your past experiences as indicators for what your future performance might be. So they're trying to think about, how in the past did you think or react as a preview into what you might be like later, if a similar problem comes up or a similar circumstance. And behavioral is really trying to understand, like I said, how you think. So why did you make the decisions you made, or why did you take the actions that you took? Any questions here? Okay, keep going. So examples of these, and I think this is where, this helps make it come to life. So fit questions might be things like, why consulting? What do you like to do for fun, right? Trying to understand who you are. I also added this one. Why do you want to live in Denver? So particularly for some place like McKinsey, where you could apply to a lot of different offices, the office themselves might want to understand, why are you thinking about our office? What do you know about our office, right? There's a lot of pride in different office cultures, and the size of the office, how often people come into the office, things like that. And they want to make sure that you're picking a location because you're genuinely interested in living in that location, not because you think it's, easy to just get admitted to that location or something like that. And so I think it's not only about preparing why this company, but why this office specifically, or this practice specifically. Do we get fit questions in McKinsey interviews, or is it just introduction and then behavioral? This is taking a step back, even outside of the experience, in my experience across all three, right? Bain, BCG, and McKinsey, it's up to the interviewer. There's no like rule book of you need to ask this type of question. And so I did get fit questions from most of my interviewers. And so I think you need to be prepared. I got, introduction, like walk me through your resume or tell me about yourself, right? Really casual questions in a few of them, but not in others. And so I think you want to be prepared for any of those. Depending on the office too, like for particularly for McKinsey Denver, they were really proud of the office and the culture they've created, and they wanted to make sure that people coming in were just as equally excited about it. And so they actually asked a lot about living in Denver and their office specifically as well, to assess how much I knew about it and why I wanted to be in that office specifically. Okay, and then behavioral questions, like I said, they want to understand how you think and react. So things like, tell me about a time when you used analysis to guide your decision making. Tell me about a time when you worked with people who approach things differently than you. Tell me about a time you set your goals too high or too low, right? And this is your opening to introduce a story that hits on, this question specifically, but may also lead to additional follow-up questions. Would you recommend starting the interview with casual questions? Um, I think this is like, this is my personal take, and I think different consultants may say different things to you. I think you want to be yourself. So are you someone who, is pretty outgoing and you want to talk about something that came up that week or something that's on your mind, or and I think it also depends on the interviewer, of course. Like, are they late to the interview? Did they just kick it off right away? Because, they're really scheduled back to back. Like, I think it's going to depend. And I think my biggest advice in responding to this is you don't want to be over scripted. You don't want to be like, okay, this is the question that I ask as soon as it starts. And then I say these three things. Because part of the interview is really understanding who you are and to be authentic. Some interviewers may try to throw you off, right? They might actually show up 10 minutes late. Intentionally, or maybe not. Maybe their meeting with their client just ran over, right? And so you might not get that window. But if that's who you are, if you like to start things to just ask like, hey, how's your week, or how's your day, or what's going on, please do. You want your personality to shine through. Any other questions? Okay. So strategies for success. You want to highlight relevant experiences, right? So I think about this part of the interview similar to your resume and similar to other parts of the interview process. There are certain skills and abilities and responsibilities that you're going to have as a consultant, things that are going to be important, right? Your problem solving abilities, your leadership abilities, driving impact. And so when you think about what stories you want to tell in response to different questions, thinking about stories that exemplify these traits is really important. You'll actually find traits, right, listed on each company website. Have you researched those? Do you know what Bain is looking for? Do you know what McKinsey is looking for? Deloitte's looking for? Because by reading that, you will. And then do you have stories that highlight those things? So I think you could be a little bit methodical, right? And even approaching this part of the interview. You want to exhibit enthusiasm and cultural fit, right? And I think enthusiasm is key. Think about it. They're running from meeting to meeting. They're meeting tons of candidates. Your energy is going to come across. And I think depending on how your interview is, right? Sometimes being on a Zoom like this is even harder. And so you want to make sure that your excitement is coming through. And I call this out because I know it's particularly tough when you've been prepping for, tens of hours, hundreds of hours, who knows, because you get to the interview and you're so nervous, and you want to remember all the tips that you've learned along the way, but don't let that get in the way of showing your genuine excitement for the company, the role, because that's important, right? And in a team room, when you're serving a client, you're going to want to bring that as well, and they're going to want you to bring that as well. So understand the company's values, mission, culture, convey your enthusiasm, make sure they know that you're specifically excited about them, about the type of consulting opportunities there are, the work, right? The day-to-day work, that, like I said, the office culture, if that's something that, you've been thinking about. And to do that really well, you need to make sure you're networking. So I wouldn't, some people, right, are very focused on networking. What do I say? How many people do I meet? I would be genuine about your networking. Like, you want to learn all this stuff so that when you're in the interview, you can say things like, I talked to so-and-so, and, they told me the Denver office does this type of event. That's really exciting to me for this reason. That shows you did your research. That shows that there are specific things that stand out that are genuinely exciting to you. And trying to script all of that is going to be noticeable. So the more research you do, I think the more genuine you can be. So genuine interest, do you have ideas of where to find that information? Yeah, talk to people, right? So I would say you can definitely look on their websites, right? And they'll highlight different things like, is entrepreneurship a big thing for the company, right? And what they mean by that is, do you take initiative? Do you innovate? Are you creative, right? And so you can look up those types of traits on their website and see what they value. And then you should talk to people about the office, those traits, the projects that they do, right? And you'll find things that excite you about it or not. And then you should, consider whether consulting is really what you want to be doing. I think interviews go both ways, right? You're evaluating them as much as they're evaluating you. Oops, let me go back. Okay. Highlight unique attributes and address gaps. So this is why I say this is a really important part of the application that people tend to miss and not leverage in the best way they can. This is a point in time where you can share stories and more information about yourself that, may not come out in the rest of the application. So I'll share a specific experience with me. So my GPA and GMAT scores were a little lower than average for Booth, right? And so specifically my GMAT, my math scores, and specifically my game theory scores and things in my undergrad transcript were lower. And so I knew that, or I thought that that's something that the consulting firms are going to be thinking about is she analytically capable enough to excel in this environment? And so I had prepped a couple stories that showed how I used data to make decisions in my day-to-day, right? And you don't want to force fit that story. So if they ask you about a time when people had a different style, you don't want to answer by saying, I did this one analysis, right? But if there are opportunities that can kind of bridge that to say, I was working on this project where we were leveraging data to make XYZ decision, and I interpreted the data this way, but this person interpreted it this way, and here's the outcome of that. Now you've shown them that yes, you've answered the question, which is people having a different style from you or a different way of working, but you've also shown them that even if your scores are lower or your grades are lower or something, you have used data to make decisions in the past in your work experience. So I think really thinking here about Are there any gaps in your application that you're a little concerned about? Do you have stories that can address those? And then on the other side too, are there things that make you specifically unique, right? So are you really, really good at simplifying, right, problems? Okay, what's an example of that? Maybe that's the trait that makes you different from the other pool of candidates, and it's not coming through on paper. Non-STEM major. So again, I can't say whether they will ask about analytical capabilities or not, right? It's up to the interviewer, depends on your profile, but I'm just saying, like, in preparation, given that in consulting you use data, you use data to make recommendations, right? As one of the angles, that's a big part, a big skill that they look for, is that, can you do that? And so, and again, it doesn't mean that you are doing big data analysis, right? It's just like, when I make decisions, I consider the facts or I consider the analysis, or, you know, anything like that. And so that could be a question that comes up. Yeah, so using data for decision making in undergrad, I mean, I think if you ever did a strategy recommendation, depending on the classes you took, right? So I was political science and economics. And so we use data in my game theory class, or for political science, even I did some regression analysis for an essay, right? And so those were all examples, but you could also even say more basic, right? I needed to make a decision about whether to make XYZ purchase in my personal life, and this is how I went about it. It doesn't always have to be academic settings. And in fact, I will actually share one more example. One of the stories that I ended up sharing and preparing for me, I wanted to show them how resilient I was and how determined, right? And I shared a story about how I tore my ACL second day on skis ever. And I was terrified of getting back on the mountain, and I had surgery. And then 6 months later, it was, you know, the winter season, and I got back out there because I didn't want to wait and build up the fear in my head. And so I talked about that. I talked about how that was like one of the hardest things for me. And, you know, that was a story that when the partner called to give me an offer, that was a story that they had talked about in the room when they were reviewing my interview. And so again, it doesn't have to, right, always be the biggest data or quantitative project. It doesn't have to be in a work setting. It doesn't have to be in a classroom setting. It can be any story about yourself that answers the question that's being asked, and conveys something, right, that you want to share with them. Okay. Preparing thoughtful questions. So this is, I think, part of the research too. Like, are you asking about, you know, are you curious about their strategy? Or maybe you saw a recent project of theirs in the news, or maybe someone told you about something about the Denver office that's really, really unique. Ask about it, right? So try to think of, you know, what do you genuinely want to know about them, about their work, about their office, about maybe their past experiences that brought them or helped them succeed at McKinsey, about whatever it is, right? So again, just try to think about questions that you really do have, and then ask those and prepare those. And then this last piece I can't emphasize enough: practice. Practice the experience interview. People do not practice it enough. Make sure you have stories. Make sure they're structured so they demonstrate what you are doing and the impact of it. Practice, you know, with friends, with family, with coaches. When you're doing a case, maybe if you have time with certain people, ask them to ask you a question. Record yourself. I did this. So I would ask myself one of the fit or behavioral questions I had, and then I would record myself and time it to see, am I being concise? Am I rambling? Am I getting the point across, right? Is this the story that I actually want to tell? Because when you hear it played back, you'll be able to self-evaluate, right? How personal is too personal? I mean, I think it depends on your comfort level and of course on, what it's about. So if it's like about a family member's illness or something, if you feel comfortable sharing it, you can. But remember, all these stories too aren't just meant to be, hey, here's like the hardest thing in my life or something like that. You're answering a specific question. So if it fits that question, then yeah, if you feel comfortable answering it, you can share it if it's something you want them to know about you. Um, okay, I'm gonna keep going. So we have a couple minutes left and I can go a little bit over too if people have questions, but I offer a bunch of different offerings on Leland. And I think the big thing that I'll say is I think maybe you can all see this too coming through in the presentation today. I took a very structured and rigorous approach to the interview process. What I mean by that is, every step of the process, I had, okay, this is my roadmap. This is what I'm going to do. This is how I'm going to approach it. This is, these are the learnings I have from all the cases that I did. I'm going to keep a file of that so I can go back and review that. Like, and that was my approach. And so I try to bring that to my consulting offerings. What that means is I have, a ton of custom frameworks that I develop from the cases, a ton of trackers for feedback and for different cases, right? Tons of notes on different industries. And I have tons of different files and resources that I created that I have now simplified so that I can share with others. And I think different people will have different styles to preparing for things. And so you want to, when you're looking for a coach, you want to find someone that fits your style, right? Because you don't want sometimes too much information, too many resources, too much structure feels overwhelming to some people. For other people, they really like it because it helps them feel like there's a number, like a checklist and a number of steps they can take to feel confident. And so I think evaluate, right? What is your style? And then as you're looking for a coach, make sure their style fits yours. And that's not to say, right, that coaches can't be flexible. So if you do work with me and you say, hey, I only have this much time and I'm trying to accomplish this, right? I'm not going to give you the full 3-month process that I took because it's not a good fit for you. And so coaches will be flexible, but I still think it's good to find someone who can match what you're looking for, even in terms of style and approach. So given that, I have 4 different packages highlighted here. One focuses on your resume. One is for case interviews. And what it also includes is my feedback tracker that I complete. And I say here it's a comparison versus peers. I've coached a lot of people. And so I can give you a little bit of input of, here's something that other people are doing that's really great, or here's something that you did that really stands out. And then some recommendations for future preparation. The experience interview. So if you want to keep learning about this, if you want to hear about PEI, if you want to hear some of my stories, if you want other sample questions, if you want how I structured my, matrix for preparation, all of that's part of the experience package as well as practice and feedback. And then the all-in package is all of it, right? So I have a number of resources that I give to you that you get to keep, but then also we have a set number of hours and we can use those hours with whatever way you want to use them. So do you want help practicing cases? Do you want to do certain drills on clearing charts or brainstorming or something like that? Do you want to do, learn some content? Do you want to do mock cases? So whatever you need so that we can, use the time to be most effective. Okay. I'm going to answer this question that came in because I think it's a great one. How do you recover from not being able to answer technical questions? So, remember how I said it's really important for me where I start with all my preparation is why are they, why is this part of the interview process and what are they looking for. So if you take that, when you're doing a case, they're trying to see who you are, how you react to things, how you're going to be when you're in front of a client, right? And so if you think about that, your role as a consultant is to be placed into a room with very, very senior people who are experts in their field and in their company, and you are getting up to speed really quickly and you're helping them with something. So there's always going to be situations where you don't know something. And so the way I approached it, then the case interview is, hey, this is who I would be if I were in front of a client and I did or did not know something, or if I messed up. And so what that is me saying like, hey, this is what I'm thinking. Hey, this is how I would approach this question. These are the steps I'm taking. I think I may not have the right formula, or I may not, this might not, this doesn't feel right because of X, but this is why I'm approaching it this way, right? Or, hey, I'm just remembering on that part of the test, I said, or that part of the interview, I said X plus X equals Y, and it doesn't. I just want to make sure that I'm calling that out, because now that I'm reflecting on it, I'm realizing that that was incorrect. So depending on your context, what you're doing here is you're saying you reflect, you either acknowledge that something was incorrect and you're now correcting it, or you really don't know where to go with this, but you're going to share insight into how you're thinking about it and use the interviewer to help guide you through the rest of it. Because the interviewer will step in if they feel like you're, if they feel like they're a partner with you as you're solving something. And in order for them to partner with you, you need to be communicating. So, hey, I'm taking this number and this number and I'm multiplying it because I think X. And then I think what you would do is you would add this on, but I'm not sure. And here's why I'm not sure. And then they'll step in and say, no, you're right. You do add it on. Some won't do that. A lot will do that, but you got to, work with them through the case as if you're in a room solving it with them. Any other questions? Okay. So last thing then before we drop, I have a document that I'm pretty proud of. I developed a document called Tips to Get to Good from Great. This is initially developed just for myself. And I basically did tons of casework in preparing for my cases. And then obviously, making it to the final round for Bain, BCG, and McKinsey meant I went through a lot of cases in the first round, in the next round. And what I did after doing all these cases is I wrote down the feedback that I received, any tips that I received, and I put it in a document so that it could help me. And so what I've done is I've, compiled all those tips together, that document, refined it, and I'm going to give it to anybody that leaves me a review after this session. And in the review, please make sure you're emphasizing at least one thing that you learned, because I want to make sure that this was actually helpful. And I will go ahead and share those tips with you. And then, of course, if you have questions about those tips and want to learn more, you can always sign up and chat me. Any questions? So you will have to purchase the case interview tips for $1 using the code below, which will make it free. And then once you purchase that, you'll be able to leave me a review. And if you do both of those things by the end of the week, then I will make sure to get you that PDF. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.